presenting them online, which could cut out at least the hunting down the message part for the bad guys. And then we have protected attribution from the media, where they have by far a much more limited scope and understanding of what's happening on the ground compared to the entire citizen population who's got phones and SMS capability. But they do have a little bit of coverage because they are media, and they're able to protect not only themselves, but ideally they've got systems in place to also protect the people that are reporting to them. Again, with any kind of collection process, we do have to worry about service interruption and message interception. These same sort of issues that are going to affect the platform location are also going to affect the passing of messages. The next stage is we've gone through, we've put the word out, we've put the platform online, things are going relatively smoothly, people are now starting to send messages into the platform, messages are being collected. Now those messages need to be processed, and that processing is not necessarily that easy. Think about Haiti. In Haiti they received over 50,000 SMS messages in the several weeks during their deployment that all needed to be looked through and processed. And so the processing has to be done by somebody. Or some system. And right now the sort of groups that we have to do this are a local team on the ground, which is what the Haiti deployment eventually transitioned over to. That we're now seeing in the crisis mapping community teams of individuals who are members of this community and willing to work for this, work on these deployments and are aware of it and kind of know the ropes. They're still relatively small relative to the online volunteers, just anybody out there on the internet, which was used initially in the Pakistan deployment that we worked on. There's also beginning to see some initial work on automated analysis. I like my internet clouds there. Some automated analysis systems to actually process these messages in an automated fashion. The problem is those are still very experimental systems, and in any case they're going to need to be fed good data that's created by groups of people. So at least for the immediate future, we're going to have to rely on groups of people to process the messages one way or the other. And right now, the primary technology that people are using, these groups are using, are a giant shared Google Doc. They just take all the volunteers, throw them into a shared Google Doc, and give them kind of a basic workflow of how they should go through and process these messages. From a security standpoint, it's terrifying that they're doing this, but from an actual usability standpoint, and it pains me to say it actually works halfway decently well, because you can actually get groups of people online, they can see everybody else is working on it, they can see the progress is being made. It's a very good morale builder. This particular doc was one of the ones that was used during the Libya crisis map by a group called the Standby Task Force that I helped found last October to start standardizing some of the processes and the response and organizing groups of individuals into teams to deal with each of these efforts. The one issue with the Standby Task Force that we have is that it's designed for short-term deployments. And we started off the Libya crisis map with a relatively small group of people that were pulled from the community that we were already aware of. And then when it came time for us to transition off, we went back to the UN and said, we're a short-term solution here. We need to either shut it down or you guys need to find people to work on it. And they said, oh, that's no problem at all. We've got a UN volunteer corps that we can put out broadcasts to the entire internet saying who wants to work on this stuff. So we went from our relatively small, closed community of people to an open call across the internet to say who wants to work on this system. So all the operational security that we put in place around protecting people's privacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, was going to be blown by the opportunity for infiltration. And again, we're back at this concept that it could be somebody who is turned, somebody who's working directly for a state organization, et cetera. The folks who let people into the Libya crisis map through the UN, they did try to do some basic background checks on the people. They asked for Facebook accounts, Skype IDs, Twitter accounts to try to prove that they were like an actual person. But that's not actually real security. What we're looking at instead as a potential model is to deal with something called crowdsourced microtasking. The idea that we can take the steps that are involved in the processing of these messages and split them up into kind of siloed processes that that people would only be able to work on kind of like an assembly line on one particular action, be that geolocation or categorization or filtering. So what we'd be able to do ideally is add at the front of this queue something for anonymization. So we could take people that have an established trust inside of an organization and focus their work on just stripping out, personally identifiable information and then passing that on to other people further on down the chain to provide different pieces of work. One of the concerns, though, is that we've now still got, we kind of added in this idea of privacy so we can strip out the identifiable information. But we now have to worry about things like accuracy. The microtasking system there was used last week for a deployment or for an exercise that replayed some of the English translated messages from Haiti. And the team involved with a team of volunteers went through using this microtasking system to do each of these steps, including geolocation. And it worked pretty well. When you look at this map, seeing where these volunteers were able to identify where inside of Haiti the messages were coming from, inside of Haiti, where these messages were coming from. This is where the rest of the messages that they were processing ended up getting mapped. Because what we had was untrained volunteers going through, taking the first thing that looked like a location, slapping it into Google Maps, and then copying the latitude and longitude back into the report. So we had things all over the place. You see a big bump inside of France, where the Haitian Creole is very similar to French, and so there's a lot of French names for towns. My favorite, personally, is the one that they put in Alexandria, Egypt, which means that they not only didn't realize what they were doing, but it didn't occur to them that the Arabic script on top of the city names was unusual. So we have to worry about inaccuracy in the system, and this is people that are trying to do their best, and it doesn't even take into account the potential for people who are trying to purposefully put in misleading information. And so the solution that we have to that is more sophisticated crowdsourcing. The image here is from a crowdsourcing platform that was used during the Pakistan deployment that's run by a company called Crowdflower. And Crowdflower has got just a really, really cool infrastructure in place that lets you do something beyond just presenting the information. You can actually track and score the people who are working on it. So again, we're starting to see this concept of corroboration where in the Pakistan deployment, we required that before a message was moved on through the geolocation step, multiple people had to agree that it was in the same place. And this is multiple random people. We also had the ability to get scoring accuracy from the people that are working on these platforms. This is done by inserting known good data, you call it gold data, into the message stream and seeing what answers people come up with based on that gold data. So you're kind of inserting tests into the process as they're working on the system. And then finally, places like Crowdflower, they have existing user bases because it's used similar to Mechanical Turk by a group of people who are familiar with the system. And so you're able to see this kind of reputation where you can see like they worked on this other thing and they were pretty accurate. And so we hope that systems like this will help us deal with the inaccuracy and help minimize the potential disruption from people who are just making honest mistakes or people who are inside the system trying to purposefully screw things up. And so we've gone through this entire process. We've set up the system, we've put the word out, we've collected the messages, and now we're at the final step, or the final step where we need to decide what we want to approve, what we want to think is actually true. And report verification is something that is the primary question that we're always asked by the aid agencies. It's kind of the big question is, how can we trust this information? How do we verify this data? And the answer is it's very, very hard. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Gay Girl in Damascus blog. Show of hands, how many people heard of that? All right, so for those of you that don't know, the Gay Girl of Damascus blog was this blog in Syria that was chronicling the life of this young girl who was living in Syria under this despotic regime, and there was bad things happening to people who were homosexual, and everyone was really concerned about it. The problem was that the Gay Girl in Damascus was actually a married guy in Ireland. And the entire thing was completely and totally faked. And he got away with it for months and months and months, fooling everybody. And it was on CNN, et cetera, et cetera. And this is really, really going to be a very difficult problem to deal with. And there is no easy answer to it. The best that we're working on right now is, again, that concept of corroboration, reputation, and history. And the Gay Girl in Damascus blog is an excellent example of that, where the information was out there, people believed it. It was very accurate, it was very detailed. But where this started to fall apart was when a reporter, I believe, from the UK who is widely known as kind of being an authoritative source of the mining of social media, he received word from some people that he knew that there were certain things inside of these messages, inside of these blog posts that weren't adding up. They couldn't find people inside of the gay community in Damascus who knew of this girl. And then they started digging more and more and more into the actual electronic side of things and found things that that further didn't line up, like where the domain was registered, where the posts were coming from, et cetera. And so we see another use case for this concept of corroboration. You know, the information couldn't be corroborated by people who are on the ground. You know, reputation, where the word came out from a reporter who was, you know, very, very well established as being accurate for information in the Middle East. And he, in turn, got that message from people who had a long history of trusted reports. So from there, they were able to work this back. We had a similar case during the Libya crisis map, where we received word that, including images, that indicated there were white phosphorus attacks taking place, which would have been a very, very serious escalation in hostilities. And what the volunteers were able to do is they dug into the metadata for the reports, you know, as it was told to me by one of the coordinators, and were able to pull out information that indicated to them that this did not take place at the time that the report was purporting that it came from. And so they ultimately dismissed it, and there have not been, to my knowledge, any further reports indicating that that was actually true. So when we go through this entire process, we still end up back at this concept of corroboration, reputation, and history. And then the final step, you know, once the reports are actually put online and they're presented, there's the possibility that it's no longer in our hands what's actually going to happen to it. The first concern is things like misinterpretation. One of the first deployments that I ever did, just when I was starting to get used to this technology, was tracking a night of rioting that took place in my hometown in Oakland. And I was just monitoring Twitter and pulling information from Twitter and from the news reports about what was happening on the ground. And at one point, there was a cop car who was kind of starting to get closed in by protesters, and he was backing up, I mean, maybe 10-ish miles an hour, and he just brushed a woman that didn't see the cop car coming. The woman went down. My understanding is that she then got back up and was able to leave and walk away. And we saw this happen. We actually, you know, it's on video. You can find live video from the helicopters of this happening. And we were now faced with the question, like, do we want to report this? Was this actually news? And we decided not to. And then the next day, I received an email from kind of an acquaintance on the East Coast saying, "Hey, I saw your map. It was really great, but you didn't have the report about the woman who was murdered when she was run over by the cops." And it's a great example of how these things can get away from you. And you know, I responded back to her, "No, we didn't report that because it didn't happen," etc. The other thing we have to worry about is manipulation. If something does get all the way through, what can be done with purposefully forged reports, and how can we detect those? I really, really liked Moxie's concept of trust agility, and I think that's something that we're absolutely going to have to work in to our system going forward at every step in this process, is the ability to retract who we trust at any given situation. And finally, the risk of utilization, the possibility that these messages, these platforms can be utilized by the bad guys. And this is one of the reasons that we've tried to do things like keep them private, not post them online unless we have to. If we do have to present information, presenting information that is delayed, that is not as useful to an adversary. And so we've got all these problems, all these potential issues, all these things that can go wrong. And the big question is it worth it? You know, as somebody who's working in security and has had to deal with a lot of these deployments, you know, even with all the things that can go wrong, all the potential attacks, my opinion is that yes, it's absolutely worth it. This technology, despite the issues, has got a huge amount of promise. And the challenges that come in are things that are expected. You know, this technology is being used in hostile conflict zones where there is an absolute need for security, and it would be silly to think that for some reason the IT side of things would be exempt from that need for security. And so the approach that we'll be taking over the next months and years is going to be to develop a set of standards and best practices that can be used to allow people to do these types of deployments safely and securely, and identify